Hello, this is Kiwani Talk. My name's Ray Scoboria. I'll be your host this evening. Kiwani Talk is a program that's usually brought to you from the facilities of WDHS at Dearborn High School, but tonight, because of technical problems, we're actually at the Centennial Library in the auditorium, courtesy of Mayor O'Reilly. Today we have a really interesting program. We have a gentleman in our town who is a new author. His name is Rodney Martin, and an acquaintance of mine for many years, former Ford employee. And Rodney has written a very interesting book. And Rodney, it's nice to have you here with us tonight.
Ray, I want to thank you for having me on your show. This will be quite interesting for having do this for the first time.
Rodney, why don't you give us a little background? Where you went to school, a little bit about your time at Ford, and then a little lead up to what got you interested in writing this book.
Well, I grew up in Detroit and went to Detroit schools. I graduated from Cass Tech. I lived on the far edge of Detroit. One side was suburbs, and behind the house was farmland. So I had the advantage of growing up literally on the farm and in the city. I went to Detroit Cass Tech High School. It was a difficult process. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And one of the individuals in the book is my Uncle Fred Heyda. And I used to ride to school with him every morning for my last 2 years in school, because he worked downtown and my dad worked downtown, and they would drop me off at school on their way to work.
Now, as I recall from the book, your Uncle Fred immigrated from Germany in, was it?
I think 1927.
1927. And he was pretty much Americanized, by the time the events in the book start to take place. Well, when I say Americanized, he liked it. He liked being here, and he was. It's your father's sister that you
Right.
married.
He was
Okay.
the husband of my father's sister.
Okay.
My Uncle Fred loved America. He loved going to baseball games and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, the main character in your book was a cousin of his.
Yes. The cousin is Wolfgang Heyda, and Fred hadn't seen Wolfgang since he left Germany.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We need to have a little bit more about your background before we get into the book.
Okay.
So just a little background of how you got to Dearborn and what you did in your working career, a little bit of that.
Well, after graduating from high school, I sort of floated around for a little while. Then, like yourself and many young men at that time, we had to do our military service. So I joined the Navy. And I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, and then I was stationed at Grosse Seal, Naval Air Station Grosse Seal, for 2 years. And then I was stationed at NAS New York for a year. And these bases are anti-submarine warfare training bases for reserves.
I see.
And I was an electronics technician, and I repaired the equipment in the tower that's used to communicate with the aircraft. And in New York, the aircraft would be out at sea, and we would be running 5,000 and 10,000 watt transmitters.
Okay. So you got quite a bit of training in electrical engineering and electrical repair and maintenance and that sort of thing while you were in the Navy.
Well, actually, I learned my electronics in high school at Cass Tech.
Oh, okay, and then build on it in the Navy.
That's right.
Hands-on in the Navy, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes.
And then after you got out of the Navy, well, I know I met you at Ford. Actually, we worked together. I worked together with Rod at Ford at one point, but you started at Ford about when?
I started at Ford in 1966. I was initially a test technician in the radio lab. I was there for about 8 years. Then all during this time I was going to night school, cranking out a degree, and got married, had a couple kids, and I still kept working towards my degree. And I finally received my degree about oh, can't remember, probably about 1980. No, excuse me, about 1973, okay? And it was just before the oil embargo struck. So instead of moving into advancement, I was happy to have a job.
That's when I lost mine. That's when I left for it, you know. It was a mandatory departure.
I seem to recall that now.
Yeah, yeah.
Except I had a lot of seniority and you probably didn't.
Yeah, I didn't have much, no. Okay, so you completed your career at Ford in the testing department or in testing areas.
Yes, I worked primarily on exterior lighting, headlamps, tail lamps, and I also did a lot of electrical component testing.
Okay. So now, when did you actually retire?
Let's see, I retired in 1996, and after retiring, I went to Wayne State and got a master's degree in sculpture.
Yeah. I've seen some of your work, and it's quite impressive what you do. The work that you know, I knew it from earlier. The work you did in wood, I thought was quite impressive. You know, but what got you going on this project?
Well, after getting my master's degree, I was poking around on the internet and thinking about doing some genealogy, and came across my cousin's webpage where she was talking about this guy named Wolfgang Heyda, who had been a U-boat commander, and how he had escaped, and they had sent a U-boat to pick him up. And having watched a lot of the History Channel, I had never heard this story before.
You know, it's a great story, and you know, it's an absolute. It's all factual. It's not. There's no. I mean, there's different interpretations in there, but I mean, it's the most accurate interpretation of events that you could produce, I would think. I've read the book. Rodney was nice enough to bring one to me, and I figured it would really add a lot if I had had a chance to read the book before our show.
But, you know, first of all, I was, you know, quite skeptical of this story. Yeah, this was a great story. Why hadn't anybody ever told it? So I went on the internet and I checked for Wolfgang Heyda, and he immediately popped up on uboat.net as a U-boat commander. And so I started digging into it, and like Ray, I had a little bit of German in college. And so I did some postings on the English sites, U-boat sites, and I also did one on the German U-boat site. Well, within 2 hours, I got a response from somebody that says, "Who are you?" And so I sent him an email back and explained to him, you know, that this was Wolfgang Heyda was a relative of mine, and I wanted to find more about him. And he says, "Well, you know, I can be of help." And this person turned out to be Hans Meyer, and he's a U-boat enthusiast because his, I don't know, maybe his great uncle was also in the U-boat service, and he was an engineering officer. He wasn't a line officer; he was an engineering officer aboard U-35. And he had the sort of fortune and misfortune of getting sunk. His fortune was he lived.
Well, it seems like most of the characters in the book are ones that survived sinkings because that's how they ended up in the POW camp. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, not too many of them. If the boat went down, they didn't get back to the surface, they didn't have to go to a POW camp.
It was, sinking a U-boat was pretty final.
Yeah, pretty final is right.
So, people ask questions sometimes, and they just want all the answers. And I wasn't really one of those. I asked questions, but I was interested and willing to do the work. And so this Hans would point me in the right direction and feed me information, and I would go digging.
Well, you know, Rodney, my quick summary of the book is I think you did a great job. And one of the things about the book that I liked, your grammar is great and your sentence structure is great, I think. I think you did a great job on it.
Well, you could thank Harold King at Henry Ford Community College
that's all
for
right.
that.
You know, you have to have people proofread your books.
Well, no,
and
he
make
was my English teacher at Henry Ford Community College. My English was inadequate, to say the least, and he taught me a formula for writing.
Oh, that's good.
And he's deceased now, but he was taught me how to write.
Yeah. We've had Henry Ford Community College on this show probably a dozen times over the years, you know. And we often try and get representatives from Henry Ford back on our show.
It's a great college.
It is, yeah. But there's some things about the book we don't want to tell, because there's some things that are really quite amazing. Some events that happen in the book that are, you know, it'd be like giving away the punchline, so to speak, you know. But the book covers a period of, gosh, what would we say, about 15 years? 16
1932 to 1947.
Okay, yeah, that's 15 years. And it is Wolfgang Heyda's chronology of events of when he first becomes involved in the naval service, the German naval service, and the point where the war is over, approximately.
Yes, but it actually, the book precedes his career by about 2 weeks.
Okay, no, that's not too much.
Heyda was a man of great luck and misfortune. And the Reichsmarine in 1932 is quite small. I think probably there was only maybe 1,000 officers total. The cadet class of 32, which is called Crew 32, consisted of 50 cadets and several medical officers to be, and or some who were already completed medical school. And they would have to undergo sea training aboard what they call a sail ship, and the sail ship was called the Niobe. And it was a three-masted, square-rig schooner bark, and they would spend several weeks aboard there. In July of 1932, it was at sea with a young crew and an experienced captain, and tremendous wind came across, and it flipped the boat over, sank, killed over half the crew of 32. This was a tremendous tragedy.
And these were the up and coming trainees for to become officers in the naval.
These were the academy officers at Murich, which is equivalent to our Annapolis.
Okay. And so all of a sudden they had half a class missing, or maybe a little more than that.
A little over half the class died.
And they had to replace those officers. You go on with that.
Okay. With only 50 openings, there's quite a selection process.
Yeah.
This is depth of the Depression in Germany just as much it was here, except it was worse there. Yeah, for a young man to get a free college education was a tremendous advantage. And young men liked to go in the military at that time because there was a tremendous amount of respect for military officers. I don't think we can comprehend or understand that. I still don't comprehend it. Well,
I have a little feeling for it because I remember from descriptions my mother gave me how much respect my father got. He was an officer late in the Second World War, and it was amazing how much respect he got, as soon as he got the I think it was Lieutenant J.G. bars, all of a sudden the whole attitude towards him changed. Now we have a short break here. We do a little Kiwanis commercial, and so we're going to break for that for about a minute, and we'll be back. So don't go away.
Nobody knows a neighborhood like a kid on a bike. Kids and their bikes explore every street, every shortcut, curve, and pothole.
Hi, Michael.
But explorers often encounter the unknown and the unexpected, and they need to be prepared. Each year, 4 times as many children are killed on bikes as kidnapped by strangers. Head injuries from a bike fall could disable your child for life. The Surgeon General says helmets could prevent most serious head injuries. So give your kids bike helmets and make sure they wear them. Bike helmets are smart.
This is how most young children become victims of fire. They never hear it. They never smell it. They never wake up. Every year it happens to over 1,200 children. 90% live in homes without working smoke detectors. Please install smoke detectors, test them regularly, and have a plan of escape. It may be the only chance she has.
Hello, this is Ray Scoboria. We're on Kiwani Talk here, and we're visiting with Rodney Martin, a new author in Dearborn and a longtime friend and acquaintance. And Rodney's telling us a little bit about the book he just published, Silent Runner, Wolfgang Heyda, U-Boat Commander, I guess. And Rodney, tell me a little bit. Let's mention your website. You have a website that addresses this book.
Well, the easiest way to find it is just Google Wolfgang Heyda. That's spelled H-E-Y-D-A, his
Okay.
last name. Or you could type in www.u-434.com, and that'll get you directly there. Myself, I just always type in Wolfgang Heyda into Google.
Okay. Okay. And of course, those maybe with a little luck, our director can get those on the bottom of the screen. I'm pretty sure he'll do that.
Greatly appreciated.
So hopefully that'll appear as a subscript at some time during the show. Okay. Now you got into the story itself, and the story has really there's a tremendous amount of description of actual U-boat,
Warfare?
warfare. U-boats basically tried to attack convoys and sink ships. They sunk a lot of them early in the war, and then the Allies got more and more effective in defending against them. And actually, at the point that a lot of the description starts, the Allies were having some improved success in combating or defending against these U-boats.
Well, the British had what we call sonar. I think the British are actually the ones that developed the acoustic detection of U-boats. This is December 1941, just a few days after Pearl Harbor. There's a tremendous convoy battle going on. I think this convoy HG-76 is under attack, I think like 7 or 9 submarines, and this is going on for a period of time. The officer in charge of protecting the convoy, this is his first assignment. However, this is Commander Walker, Johnny Walker. He has different ideas about how to defend the convoy, and he's quite aggressive. And his techniques proved to be quite good. In a period of less than a week, he sinks, his escort group sinks 4 U-boats.
That's sounds pretty impressive to me.
Yes.
You know.
And among this U-boat group that gets sunk is U-434, which is Wolfgang Heyda's U-boat. And battles are quite bloody. They're intense. I was fortunate to be able to interview 2 of the crew from U-434, and they told me what happened to them, and I asked them about it, how they felt about it, and their comment was, well, you know, that was war.
Yeah, that's right. That's the way, if you've been in it, that's basically, you resolve it over many years, and that's the way it was then, and you just had to do it. That's, you know. And but they're the lucky ones that survived. You know, I mean, the subs were always they always attempted to sink the sub, but they tried to get to the surface so they could be rescued by, you know,
Well, they tried to get to the surface because they really didn't have any other choice. It would either die or attempt to get to the surface and hope that you lived.
Yeah.
Of the 4 U-boats that were sunk, U-131, it's whole crew was rescued. U-434 only had 2 casualties, and Andrus's boat, everybody was lost, and the other boat, the majority of the men were killed. A few were rescued. And that was a very intense battle because that U-boat had just sunk the Stanley.
Yeah.
And the English were a bit ticked off.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And I remember from the book, the Stanley had an interesting background. It was actually a U.S. destroyer that was transferred to the British fleet somehow. I don't know the exact
It was part of the
details.
Lend-Lease program. I think it was the USS McKellar, and it had been transferred in that Lend-Lease program.
Well, the thing that's really interesting about the book is that the whole theater is Europe, and then these captured German Navy personnel are transferred to England at first, and then where do they go?
They get transferred to Canada. They're running out of room in England, and it was very difficult to feed them there also.
And the camp they end up is actually where? It's
The camp is Camp Bowmanville, and it was just a few miles east of Toronto in Bowmanville, Ontario. The school, the building, some of the buildings where the POWs were held prisoners still are there.
It's interesting. Okay, we're talking 1943, 41, 40 through
Right,
46, I guess, or something like that.
There were many POW camps, but the one at Bowmanville and the one at Gravenhorse, they were primarily officer POW camps. The treatment was excellent.
Yeah.
It was almost like a country club. They played tennis, they swam in a pool, they would swim in Lake, Bowmanville, they'd swim in Lake Erie, but they would give their word they would not try to escape. And the German officers stuck to their word, and they never attempted to escape as long as they're outside the gate on their honor. So they always had like minimum security.
Yeah. But there was a one escape attempt engineered.
Yes, the Otto Kretschmer, the top U-boat of ace of World War II, was imprisoned at Bowmanville, and they decided to hatch a plan to have him escape, make his way to New Brunswick, where a U-boat could pick him up. And it seemed like a far-fetched story, but this actually happened, and the POWs, once you're inside the fence, you're not on your honor anymore.
I see, okay.
You're outside your fence, you're on your honor. So they began digging 3 tunnels. One of them was discovered immediately. One of them filled with water and had to be abandoned. And the third one was making good headway, because they had the Luftwaffe officers and the Kriegsmarine officers digging the last tunnel.
Okay, and that they attempted an escape through this tunnel, and what happened?
Actually, they didn't attempt to escape. Something very peculiar happened. One day, a guard came in and decided that he was going to inspect all the unsecured spaces, which included the rafters in the building, which had never been inspected. So he goes up into this, the rafters is one building, and lo and behold, there's all this dirt piled up there. And
Where did this come from?
yes, where did this come from? So they began looking, the guards began looking for the tunnel. And lo and behold, it took them maybe a day, and they found the tunnel, and then they dynamited it.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do here is move us along, because we're running down on time.
Okay.
So that avenue was ended, so they came up with an alternate plan.
Okay. Their alternate plan was, it was a spur of the moment last thing, was that they were going to have an officer escape over the wires. Well, Wolfgang Heyda happened to be the smallest of the U-boat officers. Otto Kretschmer, the guy they wanted to escape, he was a big man.
Yeah.
So, also, Wolfgang Heyda was an extremely athletic man. He gotten A's in gymnastics in college. He spoke fluent English. So they made a little trolley car. He went out over the wires, electric wires, and dropped down. And he's walking away, and he was challenged. And but he gave the password that they knew, and he was expecting to be shot, but he wasn't. He went to the train station. There he ordered a ticket, got on a train, went to Montreal, and eventually made his way to Massanet Point, New Brunswick. And
you know, I almost think at this point, it's so interesting what happened there. I don't really think we should give our viewers a chance to, I think they should buy the book. And
that would be nice.
To read it. You know, I know you have a few to sell. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, they can reach you at the website. Or they can just use the book, use Wolfgang Heyda and on Google, and it comes up as what, the second?
Second web page on the list.
Yeah, Wolfgang Heyda is just Wolfgang Heyda is Heyda, and of course this will also be on our on the screen so people can see it there. Rodney, tell me a little bit. What was this experience like putting this together, getting your final manuscript to the point where, well, I guess you do it all on the computer nowadays.
Well, actually, what was it like? There's a comment in here. I wish to thank my wife for her enduring patience. It became sort of an obsession.
Yeah. Well, I guess writing a book probably has to be a little bit that way.
But it was really interesting and fascinating, and there's many sides to any story, and there's a lot of misinformation also that was published by newspapers. They were sometimes fed incorrect information, so nobody would know what was going on.
Well, I want to make a comment. In a number of cases, especially these battles, you've put both sides of the story, like both the English and the German side in, because that's what came out of the official reports. And a lot of those you have excerpts of those right in the book, and I think they're fascinating.
Well, you know, that to me was part of the interesting, the interesting to do was the different viewpoints.
Yeah. Rodney, you know, we're right there. We're out of time, and I thank you so much for coming on. I encourage any readers that are interested to look into this book. It's a really interesting book, and contact Rodney, and he'll get you a copy. And join us on Kiwani Talk again real soon.
Thank you.